Welcome to the Dr. Lori Mars podcast, where she interviews experts in health and science, sharing their expertise so you can live your healthiest life.
This episode of the podcast is proudly sponsored by Fit Vegan Coaching, the world's leading whole food, plant-based body recomposition program for Gen X and baby boomers. Founded by Maxime, whose personal journey began after losing his ex-fiancée to breast cancer, Fit Vegan Coaching is on a mission to disease-proof the world through the transformative power of plant-based eating and fitness. This program is the Rolls-Royce of plant-based coaching, offering all-inclusive services, personalized plans, world-class accountability, lifelong support, and more. Say goodbye to the yo-yo dieting and embrace a lasting transformation that will rev up your metabolism even post-transformation. Ready to take charge of your health and vitality? Head over to fitvegan.ca, that's fitvegan.ca, and mention Dr. Lori for exclusive bonus savings when you sign up. Don't miss this opportunity to join the movement towards a healthier, fitter, and more vibrant you. This episode of the podcast is proudly sponsored by The Healing Kitchen, your path to vibrant health. Immerse yourself in the transformative program, guided by the combined expertise of myself, Dr. Lori Marbus, and Chef Brittany Giroudi, who has lost 70 pounds on a whole food plant-based diet. Here's what's in store for you. Virtual weekly sessions. Engage in an immersive 60-minute virtual session every single week, where you'll delve into the world of wholesome plant-based goodness right from your own kitchen. Cooking with Brittany the first half hour. Unleash your inner chef as you're captivated by Chef Brittany Giroudi's culinary mastery that will delight your taste buds and nourish your body. Medical Q&A with Dr. Lori the last half hour. Prioritize your well-being during the second half hour. I will personally address your medical inquiries, providing evidence-based insights and personalized advice, empowering you to make informed choices for your health. So join us on the Healing Kitchen to help you step into a healthier and most vibrant future. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm Dr. Lori Marbus, and today I'm very excited to introduce Neka Pasquale. She is a licensed acupuncturist and founder of Urban Remedies. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm honored to be here today.
Well, I'm excited. You have a lot of places we could go and probably talk an hour at each of those places. But before we get started, I would love to just kind of listen to your journey. Like, how did you even, one, become an acupuncturist, which in and of itself is fascinating, but then also, found a company? Because from experience, I know how hard that is.
Yeah, it's been a really interesting journey because I never planned on starting a food company. And actually, when I first was deciding what I wanted to do, I was really interested in becoming a naturopathic physician. But at that time in California, it was illegal. And so I did a little bit of research and I had done my pre-med and knew that kind of wasn't the route for me. And in California, when you're an acupuncturist, you're considered a primary care physician, meaning that you can treat, all types of issues with people. And so that made me excited because I was interested in studying functional medicine and everything natural and herbalism. So I kind of didn't really prepare myself and jumped into acupuncture school. It's a 4-year master's program with the last 2 years is doctorate work. And I didn't really know what I was getting into. It was extremely difficult. And, I had to learn Chinese and all the, thousands of herbs in Chinese, Pinyin, Latin. And so anyway, it was such a great experience for me to really delve so deeply into Chinese medicine. And one of the things that I loved about it was really the food is medicine philosophy and how food is really one of the basic tenets of overall health and wellness. And because I love food so much, it was so exciting to learn all of the healing properties of common foods like apples and carrots and dairy, and just like every single food has a taste and a temperature and associated meridian. And so I really loved that, and that really excited me. And then eventually I started my practice and started to treat a lot of people that had chronic inflammatory issues. And a lot of people would come to see me that were like, I don't really believe in this Chinese medicine or know what it is, but I've tried, all these different specialists for my pain or digestive issues, and nothing's really worked. So this is I'm just willing to try anything at this point. And really started seeing how once I incorporated more of the food as medicine philosophy and really teaching people about diet, how those people really got better much faster and stayed better. And some people with like prediabetes or even type 2 diabetes could really change their health in a really drastic way in a short period of time. And then I started really looking into the food system and trying to understand the why behind the inflammation. And I got so interested in that, and so got really interested in monocropping and pesticides and just how our food is grown and how, all of those things affect our health. And so just started really, you know, pouring all of that information into my practice. And in my own, I had a really busy practice, but obviously my own little practice, I was just seeing really, really amazing results combined with the acupuncture and Chinese medicine and lifestyle modification. And so then I just started doing these retreats where I started taking people away and making all the food and juices, and just saw incredible results, and people loved the food and loved the juices. And honestly, that's how Urban Remedy started. It was like people would come and then they would feel so good. And they're like, but when I make this, it doesn't taste as good, or it takes so long to do it. And I just can't. So I started kind of doing it on the side, and it just like had a life of its own. And I realized after having a practice for 11 years, when it kind of really hit this certain milestone, I was like, I love making food, this kind of food. I love making food that is healing and delicious and colorful and kind of touches all the different senses. And so, you know how it is. I was treating pretty sick people for 11 years. And at that point, I was like, it might be nice to take a break from that intensity for a little bit and just really
Mm,
kind of focus on the food. And it all just came together at the perfect timing. So it's been
mm,
a major journey ever since, because my background is in Chinese medicine, not business. And so
mm.
I never expected to have a national business, with footprints, all over the country. And so it's been a really interesting, the last 10 years or 11 years I've been doing it, it's been a really interesting journey.
So are you still seeing patients as an acupuncturist now or no?
I do occasionally,
Okay.
I treat friends and family all the time. And
Mhm.
people joke around because my neighbors, I do have a healing room here. And so anytime I talk to a neighbor and they're like, oh, my knee hurts or my leg hurts, I'm like, come and see me. So I love doing it, but Urban Remedy keeps me
Yeah.
very busy. Yeah.
I was
So
gonna say it does more than its share of keeping you busy.
yeah.
So wow, there's a lot of places we could go here, but I think what's really resonating with me is just speaking to the food as medicine. So when you're thinking about one, your knowledge with Chinese medicine and your experience, and now you're seeing this company, what is the thinking of, okay, here's what I know works in small batches with patients, but how do you translate that into a product that can sell nationally? Like, how does that process even begin?
Yeah. Well, it's really interesting because when I started with my first storefront, I was thinking to myself, like, this is just going to be food for like weirdos like me that just love to eat super clean. But what I noticed is, we were so busy, and everybody was really, not everybody, but a large amount of people were really interested in this kind of niche food at that point. Because at that point, I was doing more like live raw food, a lot of juices and cleanses, and low glycemic meals. And, it's really interesting to go from there to here, because I think when you're in a place like California or New York, there are more people that are just naturally interested or have more knowledge about health and wellness that are interested in those kinds of things. But now, that we're in South Carolina and Florida and, all of these other states, it's interesting because that now when I'm developing things, I have to look at it in a different way and really think about like how would this consumer be introduced to this type of healthy food and understand that it tastes good and it's good for you. Like, how do you kind of bring them in? And it's been really difficult because I have been successful making food for that I like, right? Or food that I think is really healthy and delicious. And that's been great. And there's still most of the products are in that category. But as you grow, and especially as you have investors, then right, you want to open the market to a wider audience. And so that's been a really interesting journey. And there's been some wins and some losses. Like sometimes somebody will say, well, when I'm doing the market research, this is what people like or is on trend, right? And then sometimes I'll make something based on that. And it might not be as much as a win as when you're coming up with that kind of creativity and the understanding from health and wellness that might not be like a trend at this point. But everything I make is gluten-free, dairy-free, white sugar-free, no preservatives, no artificial colors or flavorings, no like finely milled grains, no seed oils. And so we've been like that from the beginning. And besides dairy, I am thinking about potentially making a grass-fed whey protein shake. But besides that, so that's a good example of where I'm like, well, this is something that I think if you can tolerate dairy, it's like a very bioavailable protein, and it tastes good. And so here's, a time where I'm like, well, maybe I can bring a whey in, even though I've never done any dairy before. And so it is also something that's more on trend and higher protein. And so I kind of try to bring all of that together, but never would I say like, oh, I'm going to put white sugar in or white flour or gluten or seed oils or anything like that. But it's kind of a balance. We went through a period a few years ago where we decided to offer animal proteins like organic chicken and salmon. And, a lot of our loyal customers were upset because we had been vegan before that. But it also addressed a much wider audience. And we also, stayed within our values, which were like sourcing organic, um, or wild farmed. So there's always a balance. And you know how it is. You can't please everybody. And so,
No, well, I'm plant-based and vegan and have been for 12 years. Just
yeah,
give you heads up on, and
yeah,
most of my audiences as well. So,
yeah,
but as far as when you speak to the plant-based components of that, what are the really amazing things that foods that you're creating that can also be very helpful for someone, let's say, with type 2 diabetes? Like, how do you approach this lower glycemic index foods, which are very important, especially someone who's just,
yeah,
transitioning from a standard American diet to a healthier diet regardless.
yeah.
So yeah, how do you
And
decide? Are you sticking within that health piece, or you're more looking more towards like the taste component
yeah.
and trends that
Yeah.
way?
For me, it's always because everything that we've done, like even when we had our animal sides, all of our foods and juices are all plant-based. And so my philosophy has always been, because I think it's really important for people to understand that there's healthy plant-based and there's, in my opinion, unhealthy plant-based.
Yes,
And so
for
my
sure.
philosophy has always been, well, one, make it delicious, right? That's an immutable. Two, having as many colorful, natural ingredients like fruits and vegetables and grains as you can, and as low processed as possible. So that's why we don't do like finely milled grains or anything like that. Um, and use oils that are not inflammatory. And even our salts that we use are, sea salt or pink salt. We never would use like iodized white salt. And so if you look at our offerings, you'll see when you pick up a bowl, there's so many colors. Like we use watermelon radishes and sweet potatoes. And like if we use a grain, it will be like quinoa, organic black rice. And we use a lot of regeneratively farmed ingredients as well. And so if you kind of look at it like that, because it can be so confusing to people, but
Yeah.
anything that you look at, the least processed and the more of the natural state it is in, one, it will tend to be on the lower glycemic side if you're looking at that specific ingredient and how you use it. And then having healthy fats like olive oil, coconut oil. Sometimes we'll use sesame oil just if it's like in an Asian kind of type of dish, or nut butters or things like that. You know, fats are a great way to slow down the glycemic index of a food. So that would be like delicious dressings that I make. Some of them, they use mostly like apple cider vinegar, lemon juice, garlic, olive oil. Very simple. For me, I love just celebrating simple ingredients.
Mm.
And so I guess that's the difference, because if you're eating a plant-based diet and you're eating like, you know, a lot of breads or like, you know, gluten-based products like pizza and donuts and anything that's highly processed, you know, usually is going to cause more inflammation in the body. And so I always tell people, just try to eat things that are really colorful, because then you also are getting those beautiful antioxidants and um, all of those polyphenols that will promote fighting free radicals and anti-aging and prevent cancer. And so it's already there. Like, that's why I'm always like, there's not much tech that needs to go into food. Like, what nature offers us is so beautiful and delicious and colorful and perfect as it is, that you just, you know, eat real food and most people will start to heal, you know? And I think
No, yeah,
there's
absolutely.
there's also a lot of misinformation out there related to like people starting to say that like vegetables aren't good for you, or beware of like all these little components. And then people
Mm.
get this food fear, which is I think a big problem, especially more in the plant-based community.
Yeah, no, there's all sorts of phobias. And then a already somewhat restricted diet by removing animal products becomes even more restrictive. And
Yeah.
honestly, many of my patients, because I'm licensed in all 50 states, so I see patients across the country, and I'll tell you, it's some long conversations. I call it the guru syndrome, right? So they've listened to someone and they're like, I only do this and I do that, and I'm like, yes, but that's causing issues. So
Yeah.
yeah, the really I call it, there's different types of phobias, right? Fat phobia, fruit phobia, you name it. There's all
Yeah.
sorts. And it's unfortunate because you do eat the colors of the rainbow. 100% agree with all that. My curiosity though is, how did you become interested in just healthcare in general? There's usually a story behind someone when they trend that way. I don't know if maybe you grew up in a home with
Yeah.
medically oriented folks already, or something else happened, but it's always fun to hear that story.
Yeah. You know, I was always interested in health and wellness as a kid. I was interested in herbs. We lived kind of off the land for a while. My parents were hippies. And so I was always interested in herbology. And when I was in high school, I had a book and I would just read about it. And I always thought it was really interesting. And I was exposed to um, a lot of, I did do some acupuncture when I was younger. Um, but it was always just kind of a calling of mine. I mean, I really always loved food and I did think about going into food, but I was like, I feel like I would lose my passion if I was a
Mm.
chef, for example, or something like that. Um, but I used to love to read a lot and I would just read books on health and wellness. And I knew, I don't know, it was just a knowing I have that I wanted,
Mm.
that's kind of what I wanted to do.
Awesome. And
Yeah.
so if you can explain also, because of the acupuncture piece, my first exposure to acupuncture was actually when I was in residency. So my grandmother lived with my husband and I for
Oh,
many years, and she had chronic neck pain from a particular incident anyway, and would go just in severe pain. And so a friend of mine who was a resident with me, so he was a senior resident, I was in family medicine, and he was getting his license in acupuncture. So he'd come to California for a period of time, do whatever his didactics was, and then come back and look for people to, practice on. So I was like, hey, would you mind coming over and taking care of my grandmother, just, trying it out? And sure enough, so I watched him do his thing, and it was the coolest thing to see. Her neck, where the pain was, it when he was done, it like quivered, and then it just went, and she went
Yeah,
like the wildest, like, ah, and she did not have pain for like 8 months after that one session.
right.
And I was like, I don't know how this works, but that is really cool. So could you explain, like, what are the principles of acupuncture? Why does it work? Like, that would be
Yeah.
fascinating.
It's so interesting because when I was in acupuncture school, like I said, I had done my pre-med and then I started and I actually had two medical doctors that had already been practicing their medicine that wanted to incorporate Chinese medicine. And it was so difficult for us and way more for them because you literally have to change the way you think about the body because it's a whole different system. And so, in Western medicine, you look at the liver and the functions of the liver and maybe the associated diseases and how you would treat that disease. In Chinese medicine, you look at everything as a whole system and everything is so interconnected and everything is connected through a meridian system. So it's kind of like highways through the body. And one of the other root causes of illness is stagnation. And so if you have, a meridian and you have a blockage somewhere, like your grandmother had a blockage, let's say in her neck, there was a blockage of energy of what we call form of energy, chi. And, he probably put the needles there and opened up that stagnation. And a way to think about it that I love is like a bruise. Like imagine, you have a bruise in your arm. That's the body's way of creating stagnation. That's a reaction from, a hit or a fall or something. But, the blood coagulates or gets stuck there, so you get a bruise. And what acupuncture does, if you're thinking about it in that way, is it goes in and opens the channels like to help that blood go through and smooth through. And so anytime there is stuck energy in the body, we know where to put the needles to open that energy to stimulate blood flow and circulation so that everything's flowing properly. Because when you have stuck energy in the body, then where it's flowing to will be blocked, right? And so that's why, something like if you have blocked energy in your liver, and it could be from stuck emotions, it can be from your diet, it can be from, a physical injury. Um, the connection that the liver has to other organs will also create, a issue in the body. So there's this like inherent connection of organs and systems. And I love how in Chinese medicine, like I said, not only are things related to like the physicality, but we also look at the emotion that's associated with different organs. Like it's really interesting to um, see that in your practice because like sometimes, for example, people would come in that would have asthma um, or COPD or something like that. And you could put needles in and the lungs are related to grief. And as you talk to people, a lot of times people would say, oh, I'm so sad. I just lost somebody, or I've been holding this grief in for so many years related to some sort of loss or, emotional trauma. And then you see them, sometimes people will start crying or we would just release it and they're like, like, I just feel like I can breathe again. And so you can kind of see the relationship between emotional trauma or any kind of emotional disharmony and how it really affects the physical body. And lastly, the other thing I love about Chinese medicine is we really look at the body as part of nature. And so when you look, it's complex, but very simple, meaning we are an inherent part of nature. And so in our modern society, we've really lost connection with that simplicity, meaning we go outside and, when the sun rises, it's time to wake up and we eat when we're hungry and we drink when we're thirsty and, eating simple foods that come from the earth that a lot of times are seasonal. So like if you live somewhere cold, during that season, you would be eating more of the foods that are grown, like root vegetables and warming stews and soups. And then in the summer, when spring starts, you would eat, greens and watermelon and things that are more cooling when it's when it's hot outside. So it's really like being in harmony with the natural world. And for me, that's like one of my biggest passions, is talking about that, because we're all so busy and we sit in front of our computer and under artificial light and eat crappy food and don't really exercise or walk in nature or even spend time in nature. And then we wonder why we're sick. And I think it'd be so cool if all doctors were trained just on that. Like, could you imagine how many lives would be changed if we just taught people, like, spend time in nature, spend a little time in the sun, like, don't fear the sun. You don't ever want to get sunburned, but make sure you're getting your vitamin D and just like breathing in clean air and drinking clean water. So anyways, that's something that I am very passionate about as well, that relates to Chinese medicine, because that's a really important concept.
No, I can't even tell you how many times I tell people, like, we forget we are
Yeah.
actually part of nature. We like to think that we're not. And, it's disrupts like the mind body connection, and really thinking about the body as an entire system is fantastic. I think that's where medicine has gone way far. It's
Yeah.
because we're having a shortage now of, for example, primary care physicians, and because everyone specializes, they get so niche down that they forget, the whole system, that it still affects whatever they've niched down to. Not that we don't need those folks, but it is really important to understand the complexity of the system as a whole. And then the largest system that we should be constantly plugged into is nature, 100%. I was listening to a podcast this morning, and it's called The Hidden Brain. I just love psychology and the behavior stuff,
Yeah.
but they were speaking to a gentleman. I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but he wrote a book about anxiety and different things, but he's also a professor. And he said what he did was he had a friend of his that would go, he had lost a brother and was just really grief stricken. So he used to take these awe walks. So like he would want to be in awe of something. Because I always tell people, like, imagine seeing the Grand Canyon and you're in awe. So what he would try to do is walk in nature and be awe, right? And so he assigned his students, he started working with undergrads, and he said, okay, I want you guys to do an all walk, because he has this real, he wrote a book regarding how technology is really affecting our young people, but it's also affecting everybody, right? It pulls us even further out of nature, right? We get so honed in on this. We're limiting even our physical contact with other humans because of this
Yeah.
technology. And so he said, well, he assigned them to go for these awe walks and then to write back what happened. And one student in particular wrote about how she was sitting in Washington Park, and literally it was just suddenly something overcame her. She felt so present, right? And so in tune with nature, that she says, I just felt this overwhelming sense of love and connection with everybody who walked by, the trees, nature. And so that power of that being present was so incredibly conscious, right? She's being conscious. I call it conscious rising. That was really cool. So I think that's piece there. But my question to you is, what is the dosages? Like, where should we be aiming? Because we do live in this modern world, but so what is the dosage of nature that you find that really affects from the Chinese medicine side of things? Like, what it would be the prescription be, or is it just the more the dose, the better type thing?
Well, I think the more the better for sure. But I hear what you're saying, because it is, because people can go, you don't want people to feel guilty or feel like, oh, I'm not doing enough. And then it causes them stress, right? Because then that's like, that's not helpful. So,
Yeah.
I think that, like I said, if you just keep it simple and be like, even if like if all you have is 10 minutes, it's like, wow, 10 minutes in the morning, like grab your cup of tea, turn off like every device, your phone. And if you have some outdoor area, like just sit outside. And like I loved what you said. It was like just being present and being present with yourself, which is, a lot of us aren't used to doing that. But sometimes it's really just just being there and just like being around nature and just even closing your eyes and really kind of just feeling yourself and then feeling the sunshine and just, the more you feel a part of that system of nature, the more benefit you're going to have. And I think once you start doing it, you have those aha moments like you were just talking about, because it's really, it's like the simplest thing, but we just don't take the time to do it. Or even, going for a walk. And when you're on a walk, don't listen to a podcast, look at your surroundings and notice like the flowers starting to bloom or just the beautiful trees or the birds in the trees. It's like the simplest things, but that beauty actually affects our brain. When you see beauty, it causes it promotes serotonin and the feel good hormones. So it's just like witnessing beauty of nature. And even if you're not in nature, then it's just, witnessing beauty with where you are, or, finding that in yourself. But really the greatest thing is really just, it's so simple. Like, when the sun comes up, like that's your body's natural time to rise. When the sun goes down, it's like time to wind down and like quiet your day. And, when you're looking at your diet, or when you're eating, it's like, wow, like tuning into yourself, like do I feel hungry right now? And like, what does my body feel like it needs? Because I think the other thing people forget is really so much of your healing capacity is in yourself. And so you might listen to a podcast or read something that resonates with you and you might want to try it, but really people are their best own like advocates. And, I see so many people that give away their power and their health to whatever it is. It could be alternative medicine, Western medicine, it doesn't matter. But it's that capacity to like trust our physical body and know that like, wow, these bodies can heal. They have this innate healing capacity. And all we have to do is really be aware of that and just feed our bodies like that colorful, beautiful food and drink clean water and get good night's sleeps. Like that's really the foundation of health. And I think some people get so wrapped up in like, I have to walk 20,000 steps today and I'm not going to eat any carbs. And I'm only going to I'm going to eat, so many blueberries because of their antioxidants and this and that. And then we get so in our head and it's just contra intuitive to, what real health is. Right.
Right. No, there's so many ways I could discuss that. Yeah, 100%. Right. So we have, for example, I'll have patients come in and they've done a checkoff list. They love checkoff lists. They love protocols. They love like step by step because they feel like that's the answer. Okay. They're always looking for an answer and they're neglecting the foundational, activities like you're describing. 100%. And so what's sad though is, let's say they do check off all the boxes, like, man, I'm doing everything. I'm eating my wide variety of foods. I'm doing 30 different varieties a week or 50 or whatever someone said. I'm drinking my water. I'm exercising. They have this really complicated morning routine that they've been doing and they're stressing about it. That's a whole nother issue. But what's interesting is, something is not looking right on the labs. They get emotionally upset by, some data. I was like, this is just data. It's dynamic data. First of all, it's different today than it was the day it was drawn. But it's really interesting to how people want to control things and then they get very stressed or anxious when they can't control it. And I think the other piece to a little bit more peaceful life is just accepting change will always be the only constant. So once you accept that and you don't control the future, because guess what? Future will write itself. Once you do that, it gets much easier. And all you can do is what you can do in this right now, this one particular moment. What can I do today to make me healthier? And but it's such a simple thing, but it's so hard for some people to accept and appreciate.
Yeah, I think we've really kind of like, our culture has normalized disease at such a level that people almost feel like it's normal to be sick. And I watch commercials with my son and he'll be like, what is that? And it'll be like for cancer or something. And and it worries me because I'm like, him watching, I'm like, oh, he's just going to think that that's just a normal thing. Like, oh, when you get cancer, this is what you do. And so we never teach people like about their innate healing capacity and, maybe like removing toxins from their home or their beauty products and their food and just like the huge impact that would have. And it's kind of like people almost expect that to get sick in their lifetime. And I think that's a really bigger problem than we talk about, because if people understood their innate healing capacity and just already kind of had that feeling in their body, it would be so much more empowering for people, to be like, I know that my body can heal. And then, like you said, change happens and things happen and we have stress, but, being the moment and dealing with things the best we can with the information that we have. Because I think fear is, causes a huge amount of imbalances for people, whether it's dietary related or health related or, anything else in that arena.
I think most, just speaking about fear as a topic of fear are these thoughts that we conceive and the body responds to it, right? So our bodies are going to respond to the energy of thoughts, right? And I'm assuming there's some shift in the meridians, but to get me back, I did have a question regarding like, how do you know like what meridian and what to do? Like, how do you even decide the treatment? Because when you speak of energy, like, how do you
Yeah.
like hone in on that?
Yeah. So diagnostically, there's different ways that we look at each person's individual constitution to figure out, where the imbalance is. So we talk to people, right? Interview the same way you do, like what's bothering you. And then, based on that, if somebody says, I have terrible PMS, I'm so irritable. When I have my cycle, I have, irregular bleeding and my breasts swell and get tender. Like all of those things in my mind, I'd be like, oh, that's related to something called liver qi stagnation. And then we would feel their pulses. And so pulse diagnosis is a big part of Chinese medicine. And through the pulse, there's different qualities that relate to different organs and meridians. So then you put together kind of what they're saying and the pulse. And then we look at their tongue. And the tongue, you can kind of see more what's going on internally in the body. So if somebody has like a bright red tongue with like very little coat, then that's a sign of excess heat in the body. Or if somebody has like a really enlarged tongue with like really thick fur, then we're going to be like, oh, there's too much dampness in the body. And both of those relate to different organs. And then also just looking at the person, like, do they have, thinning hair or dry hair, like silky smooth hair? Is their skin dry? What does their complexion look like? Do they look really pale? Do they like look bright red? And so we take kind of all of that information, and based on that, we can tell, kind of what the syndrome is, if it's like an excess syndrome or a deficiency syndrome, and then relate it to the specific organ. And then, there's all of these acupuncture point prescriptions based on the imbalance that we would find with that organ. And there's so many different ways of using acupuncture. There's like 5-element acupuncture, traditional Chinese medicine. And so there's different ways to get to the same place, just like in Western medicine, like people treat things differently. But it's such a beautiful medicine. I mean, I've seen so many miraculous things with acupuncture over the years. And I just feel so grateful that I get to practice it, because it's a really, really amazing medicine and tool.
What are some of your really amazing stories you like to share with people, if you can?
Yeah. I was just telling somebody the other day, somebody was saying, oh, I have this ringing in my ear. And one time I had this woman, I've treated tinnitus over the years, but one time I had this woman come in that was just losing her mind from the intense ringing constant in her ears, in her ear. And she had been to every specialist, she had done everything. And she was like, I'm just going to try this. And I I had treated it, but not a ton. It was not a specialty of mine at all. And I did a very simple point prescription for her. You know, there's certain points that are for ringing of the ear, tinnitus. And I didn't do anything out of the norm. I gave her one treatment and it was gone. And
Wow.
I mean, because normally when the more chronic something is, usually the more treatments you'll need to see a result. But I saw her 6 months later. I saw her after, I mean, just that one treatment got rid of something that she had chronically for such a long time. And I couldn't believe it. I was like, I can't even believe with
Mhm.
one treatment, we didn't even do herbs or anything. It was just the acupuncture. Um, I've done a lot of fertility with people. And so people that have gone through IVF and had, multiple miscarriages, using acupuncture, diet, and some lifestyle modifications, seen so many people get pregnant once they started Chinese medicine, lots of babies. So that's always been miraculous and so joyful to like see people get pregnant that have been trying for such a
Mhm.
long time. Um, and then the other things I used to treat people that had like severe neuropathy, people that had HIV, that had AIDS, that had really terrible side effects from the medications they were taking, as well as cancer, like going through chemo and just being able to drastically reduce the side effects for people whose quality of life had gotten so poor due to, things like neuropathy and things like that, where nothing was working for them. And just doing the acupuncture, relieve the symptoms, if not fully, 80 to 90%. And I just those are the stories that always just make me so excited and just to really see people's quality of life improve
Mhm.
so drastically. Yeah.
Yeah, so the gentleman I spoke to, the resident that worked on my grandmother, and my grandmother had had that pain for almost 4 decades because
Wow.
she was in a very violent marriage and she had been choked a few times and had neck injury. And so it's interesting you speak to the emotion that is associated with injury and the bodies and different things. So
Yeah.
um rest her soul. But it was a really interesting thing for me. It was my first evidence of that type of thinking, right? And but I can see where the doctors who are training in traditional medicine then go to something like that. It is a very different process
Yeah.
of thinking. But I wanted to speak to the tinnitus piece because I know that as I was in the military and so I was in the Air Force, and so one of the things is people were discharging out they would do claims for impairment ratings and different things based on disability, but tinnitus was a huge one because they're around loud engines and artillery and different things. And so my question is, like, is there things that one can do at home? Like, is there like pressure points or things, or does it need to be acupuncture, or like how would they maybe find someone that could be helpful for that? Because I know that is a seriously
Yeah. Oh,
under dealt with situation. Oh my heavens.
and it's terrible for people because they can't even go to sleep. And that's the
Right.
worst time for people. They try to go to sleep and it's quiet, and then they have this, this constant
Mm,
ringing. And for some people, I mean, it causes major anxiety and, severe psychological distress.
yeah.
Um, if I was going to say, like, if you have tinnitus, I would say try to find a licensed acupuncturist because um, that would be the best route. I mean, if you're really experiencing it, because really, like, a lot of the points are around the ear, behind the ear, and then there's some distal points on the body. But you absolutely, I mean, uh, something you could do if you don't have access to an acupuncturist is you could, massage, and when you open your mouth, you can kind of feel a hole. You can really deeply massage, but it's never going to be as strong as if we were doing needles. And you could also Google, acupuncture points for tinnitus And if you were to do that, I was seeing if I have a pen around here. Sometimes I would have people, for example, like somebody was having a headache and they couldn't get acupuncture. This is just an example. There's like a great point that's right here in the hand. And so I would teach people, you could like massage here, but massage to the point that it really hurts, or you could get a pen, and put it in the point and just really push the pen, not the tip of the pen, but the end of the pen, and really like put it in there until it really aches. And it won't be as strong as acupuncture, but acupressure works, but it tends to hurt more because you really need to. We call the points, they're called assure points, because when you get to a point that hurts, it means usually there's energy blocked. So when you're looking around for that point, you want to actually find the point that is sore. And so for some people that, it's a little hard because you don't really necessarily want to do that. But anyway, that's kind of
Right.
how you would do
Okay.
it. And there's
No.
certain things like eating things that are too spicy or fried or things like that would tend to, a lot of times, tinnitus is related, we call it like a chi rising. Like your energy that's supposed to be going down goes up.
Okay.
And
Okay.
so you want to get the energy back going down. And for everybody's constitution is different, but eating things that are too hot and spicy and greasy, that might be one thing. Like lower that and try to do like more green juices and green foods and like fruits and veggies, and eat less processed foods. But like that, like we were talking about, I mean, that's kind of with everything, like the more colorful things that you're eating that are in its natural state, those foods naturally lower inflammation. So it's like always kind of going back to that same foundation.
Yes, absolutely. Which gets me back to, because I want to be mindful of your time here, but the pieces to your food. Tell us a little bit about Urban Remedy, and like, are you available in all 50 states? Like, how can people, and it's urbanremedy.com, and we'll have the links, but anything in particular?
We are in a lot of different Whole Foods. If you go to urbanremedy.com, there's a locations page, and you can put in your zip code and it will show you the closest Whole Foods, or we're in a bunch of different natural groceries. I was just in Hawaii and I was in a health food store and they had Urban Remedy. I didn't even know it. It was so cool. So I don't know all the locations that we're in, obviously, but we're not in every single state. But if you're interested, you can order online on our website, and we do ship directly to your door. And then we're in Kroger's, like some of our juices and lemonades and things like that. But the best way is really to go to that locations and then see what location is closest to you. But we are in over 300 Whole Food stores across the country, and we're expanding, which is really exciting. So
That is exciting. And I had some of it. It's so delicious. So
thank
yeah, no, it's fantastic. You're always like, you see the ingredients, you're like, I wonder what this will taste like. And it was actually very delightful. So
yeah. I try to create everything with like as few ingredients as possible and just really clean ingredients. And like I said, anytime you're getting something from Urban Remedy, always consider it a food safe zone. Like there's never going to be, seed oils. Right now, there's never dairy. There's no gluten. There's no preservatives, artificial colors, flavors, anything like that. No animal products. We don't have those sides I was talking about anymore. We had stopped that. But so anyway, it's just very, very clean. I feel like it's the cleanest food out there. And one thing I did not mention about Urban Remedy that's important and eating is we're also certified organic. And so it means everything that we have has not been sprayed with things like glyphosate and, pesticides and chemicals that conventional produce is sprayed with. And so my philosophy is really just using the cleanest, most colorful whole food ingredients that we can to make, clean and healthy eating easy for people, because everything we do is ready to eat. So you could just like grab a salad or a green juice or a bar. We do all the day parts, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And yeah, I'm really proud of our offerings and just how clean they are and how people really do use our products. Not only do they enjoy it, but they use it to improve their health. So
well, I think that's lovely.
yeah.
No, That's fantastic. It's a great resource for people who are also, I don't have time to cook healthy. And so if
Yeah,
they have someone close by, they can understand that they can grab it without worry about reading the ingredients and
yeah.
concerns about where their food's coming from. So that's fantastic. You've done all the hard work for us.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
All right. Well, that's fantastic. Well, thank you so much for spending time with me today. And I'm sure this has been really interesting. I've never really spoken to someone who's a licensed acupuncturist before, so this is
Oh,
fascinating. So thank you for sharing.
oh, thank you so much. It was so fun to talk to you. I appreciate it.